And now again with the so-called novel China coronavirus, SARS-CoV-2 as it's now called, popularly known as the Chinese coronavirus these days. This virus emerged on December 1st of 2019, the exact same day that China mandated a new vaccine schedule. Here, very briefly, I'll discuss strategic failures of the medical paradigm, and especially more specifically in medical education. All consistently unaddressed failures are intentional failures. Consistent failures on anything related to nutrition, including but not limited to cardiovascular disease, diabetes, and obesity. Consistent failures in anything related to nutrition also applies to viral infections, as I'll show you throughout this video. Education in nutrition within medical education is consistently insufficient or completely absent, as you can see from the following citations. In 2014, I updated my antiviral protocol and titled it Antiviral Nutrition, and you can see an overview of that strategic plan right here. Step number 1 is addressing viral acquisition and viral entry or penetration into cells. So perhaps obviously, viruses cannot replicate on their own. They have to enter into a host cell and commandeer or hijack the cellular machinery, which then does the replication of the viruses. Viruses do not replicate on their own. They have to enter into a cell and kind of hijack the intracellular machinery of that cell for their replication. So if we stop the virus at the level of acquisition or cellular entry, then we've effectively stopped the virus. Once the virus has entered, we can try to stop replication, and we can do that by the use of skilled nutritional interventions. Step number 3 in my overall plan is addressing the immune response to improve that immune response against what in this case would be now an established viral infection. And we can also support cell and systemic health to combat some of the adverse effects of viral infections. So you can look at these individually, 1 through 4, as I've illustrated here, and you'll also notice that these overlap one with the other. So certain nutrients, for example, may have an anti-replicative effect. They also may have a direct antiviral effect, and they also might stimulate the immune system while reducing systemic inflammation. So certain nutrients can be placed in all 4 categories of this overall antiviral strategy, whereas other nutrients might be more effective or exclusively effective in one particular area. For more details, you'll have to look at my antiviral nutrition strategy, published again as an ebook, Antiviral Nutrition, also a paper book, Antiviral Strategies and Immune Nutrition. Antiviral interventions, virus-directed versus host-directed. So here I'm going to discuss 2 different paradigms. Mostly the medical paradigm focuses exclusively on the virus with vaccines that are specific to each virus and antiviral drugs that are specific to each virus. In integrative medicine and functional medicine, we look at that, but we also look at host-directed interventions. And so I'll outline the distinctions between those two perhaps on this page. Medical paradigm is virus-specific for limited use and maximum profit because they want to sell a different vaccine and a different drug for every single viral infection. Nearly all antiviral treatments used in medicine are doubly virus-specific in that, number 1, these drugs target the virus and ignore the host, and number 2, most of these drugs target a specific virus with very little crossover or carryover to other viral infections. Of course, all these start as patented drugs sold for maximum profit by a single manufacturer, at least until the patent expires. Likewise, vaccines are always highly specific to individual viruses and even isolated strains within a group of viruses. And obviously some vaccines are specific to bacteria, but they are nearly always by definition very specific. They don't provide general health improvement, and they don't carry over to preventing other diseases. So again, the medical profession wants to sell a different treatment and a different preventive measure for each viral infection because that's obviously the way to maximize profit. This creates a huge market for products because each illness is considered to need its own vaccines and its own antiviral drugs, separate from those used for other infections. This is why the vaccine schedule has exploded from a few vaccines to several dozen vaccines over the last couple of years. New drugs and new vaccines, especially when contextualized within an emergency or panic, are nearly always subjected to very low scrutiny and very enthusiastic endorsement because the medical profession needs products to sell and they want to give the appearance of addressing whatever the new concern is, which at this point we've had new viral emergencies virtually every year and sometimes every other year. The medical response relies largely, but not exclusively, on new products, just like any other industry, such as the auto industry or the music industry. They always have to come out with something new to sell to kind of gain the attention of the public. Treating the actual host is considered a radical idea in medicine. So, for example, a recent letter or commentary was published in The Lancet in 2020 in February titled Reducing Mortality from the 2019 Novel Coronavirus. Host-directed therapies should be an option. They were presenting this as a somewhat novel idea. It should be obvious that we need to treat the human host who has whatever the infection is. Another aspect of the medical paradigm, which is in this case relying mostly on antiviral drugs and vaccines, is it's a simple message to communicate to people. This vaccine for this infection, this drug for this infection. Simple mechanisms and easier understanding creates more use despite fewer benefits. In contrast, when we look at the host-focused model, treatment is mostly, but not exclusively, focused on manipulable targets in host physiology, such as barrier defense, stopping viral replication, promoting the immune response, and also managing and improving and supporting cellular and systemic health. These overlapping mechanisms require a more complex and nuanced understanding, ultimately providing better use and more benefits, but people, patients, and doctors have to cross a certain intellectual threshold in order to understand how these host-focused interventions work. Again, the host-focused model, which relies strongly on nutrition, has many overlapping mechanisms. This requires a more complex understanding, but ultimately provides better intervention and more benefits. From the videos I made in late 2019, I discussed the pharmacocentric or medical paradigm, and that is, healthcare centers around drugs and surgery. Drugs are the assumed or presumptive solutions to all health problems, regardless of dangers, costs, inefficacy, or the existence of better options not taught in medical school and residency. If any better solution is not a drug or vaccine, then it is not considered a, quote, realistic, unquote, solution. You can access this video on my website, inflammationmastery.com/antiviral, and you can also directly download the video file. So I'm now going to begin discussing reasonable antiviral interventions for coronavirus. We're going to look at the research. I'll give you my opinion on how valid some of this might be and what I might personally do in this situation. Again, I could tell you about several dozen interventions, nutrients, botanicals, minerals, vitamins, and drugs that we could use in an antiviral strategy, but for the sake of simplicity and expediency, in this particular presentation, I'm really going to focus in on 6 interventions that I think are the most important.